everyone. I'm Liz Eggleston, and I run Course Report, which is a resource for students who are choosing a coding boot camp. If you haven't looked at Course Report yet, this is my one shameless plug. I do it at the beginning of all of our videos. You can use our directory to find schools that fit your learning style. You can check out our blog for interviews with students and instructors like this one, and founders at boot camps across the world. And plus we've got, application tips and virtual classroom tours and so much more. So for the next few weeks, we are going to be sharing insights into online platforms. As you know, because of COVID-19 and quarantine, a lot of boot camps are moving online right now. And so we're going to be sharing as many of these online classrooms as we can with you so that you can do your best research. And today, Cody Miller from LearningFuze is here to walk us through the LearningFuze online classroom. Thanks for joining, Cody.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So usually LearningFuze is based in Irvine in Southern California, but because of COVID-19, LearningFuze has moved entirely online. And Cody is going to walk us through the differences between LearningFuze online versus in person. He'll also share his screen and give us a quick tour of the LearningFuze online classroom. And he's going to share some advice for students who are just trying to really excel in an online boot camp and actually get a job when they graduate. So Cody, thank you so much for being here. You are the lead instructor for the first part of the full immersion program at LearningFuze. So maybe just start and tell us how you actually got into tech. Did you take a traditional path into software engineering?
Yeah, actually, you know what? I didn't. When I got into tech, I had been working in special needs care for 10 years. I put a lot of focus on kiddos with autism, and I loved it. It's a huge passion of mine. My girlfriend even still works in the industry, so I get to talk to her about it. But it had just reached a point where it wasn't economically viable anymore. I just had to be I need to make a change or think about how I'm going to pay for stuff. So a family member had suggested that I look into software engineering, and I started looking around for boot camps, and the rest is history. I've learned to code, and then now I get to continue to teach and also code every day. So it's really exciting.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, so tell us about LearningFuze's reaction to COVID-19 right now. Are we correct? All classes are moving online for now?
Yes. Yeah. Everything that we do is remote currently. So we don't even have our building open. Everything is operating remotely. But the good news is that before that move was made, we had already been in the planning process because we saw this as the possibility coming forward. So when the day hit where, we're located in California, and the governor said, we need to stay at home, all of us were able to just group up and say, all right, today's the day, time to enact the plan. So we chatted with our students and got them set up and ready to move into a remote standpoint, and we just kept rolling. We had one day of setup and then picked right back up the next day.
What have you noticed that the most successful students have done as they've shifted to remote learning, for that cohort of students that started in person and then moved online?
Yeah, so I would say there's probably two really big things that I've seen that make people very successful. The first one is being aware that you need to have a comfortable working environment, because one of the realities of working from home is that we're just surrounded by all of the distractions that make us most comfortable every day of our lives. And that's cool to be able to be in that environment, but it does make it somewhat hard to focus on work when you need to. So I always recommend to my students, the first thing you should do is set up a dedicated work area where you're not going to be interrupted. And the students that take me up on that and clearly have their own separate working space are always much more in tune with the curriculum. So that's a big one, just making sure that you have an area that you can work in. That's great. And then the other one also is that we work really hard to continue to foster community with our students. Remote learning makes that a little bit more difficult because you can't be in the same room and chat with your fellow students. But we're trying to offset that by creating events for our students. We set up minor game day gatherings where we can do remote online games together, or gather up for tea time. We have dedicated channels for discussion of off-topic stuff in our Slack. Basically just trying to make sure that our students have that opportunity for community, and the students that take advantage of that and continue to foster community always do really well because they find the fellow students that have strengths and they can build a collective base of knowledge. So yeah, I would say the biggest things is being able to have a dedicated work area and still being engaged and being part of the community, even from a distance.
And when you say have a dedicated work area, that makes total sense. Do you have any advice for students when they're like setting up their online classroom or like online workspace, maybe tools that you like, hardware or software?
Yeah, I would say probably one of the biggest recommendations I could give, and this seems kind of silly, but multiple monitors is a huge help. When you're working in code, there's a huge likelihood that you've got one window open with Google that you're researching in, one window with your code, and then one with the live version that you're updating as you go. And working off of one monitor makes that a slog. So I work with 3 monitors actually, and even then I still run out of space sometimes. So I always encourage my students, make sure you've got enough screens to work with. Having a dedicated keyboard and mouse instead of just using the one on your laptop tends to help quite a bit. Let's see. I think that's probably, make sure you have a good chair. This is definitely a environment where it's really easy to start like getting your back out of whack and stuff like that. So I definitely encourage my students to have a comfortable working environment where they don't have to worry about being in pain at the end of the day.
I was just Googling the best chairs for working from home, so
Man,
can confirm. So y'all are moving classes online for now, but does that also mean that LearningFuze will be launching like a full-time remote immersive, even once things kind of go back to normal, if we can call it normal?
Right. Yeah. Whatever the new normal is. But yeah, actually we are in the wake of this switch, we're discovering that our curriculum was perfectly suited to make that switch over to remote too, that it was just a very seamless transition. So we're planning on, even when we can get back to having in-person full immersion, we're also going to be launching a fully remote full immersion program so that people can still take up this experience if they need to. And it also opens the door for us to have students from outside of California, which is really exciting too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so you mentioned setting up community and making sure that you're like continuing to build community even though you're remote. How are y'all finding that you're able to like ensure that remote students don't miss out on anything that an in-person student would get? Like, are they still doing capstone projects and demo days and like career days, things like that?
Yeah, great question. We are. That was one of the big things that we wanted to prepare for was, when we moved to this remote option, ostensibly we've learned lost a lot of opportunity for interacting with others. So we just hit the ground running, trying to create opportunities to still have that in a different format. So we actually have all of the same things that we had before still active. We've just made adjustments to make them compatible with a Zoom meeting. So all of our communication is done through Zoom, but we still have what we would call lunch and learns, which is where we'll have people from the industry come in and talk to students during lunchtime. And we've switched to, instead of having them come and talk in front of the students, they run their own Zoom call. And we've been doing the Ask Me Anything format a lot. So we can just have people come in and the students can remotely just ask about things they want to know about the community. We're still doing demo days. We're just going to be doing it by way of sharing screens in a Zoom call in breakout rooms. And we definitely still have our capstone project as well. Students are doing their final project. We just make sure they're set up with a Zoom workspace so that they can have a dedicated area to work alongside their fellow group members.
Where are your students right now in the curriculum? Like what week are they on?
My students, I handled the first half of the program. So we still have another senior cohort that is just getting started on their final project. My group, my cohort, just finished their first hackathon, which is really exciting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they were doing it for 2 full days, and they just got to finish and get some code reviews yesterday, and it all looked amazing. They're doing a great job. And they're just about to start tomorrow their curriculum on object-oriented programming. So
cool.
Yeah, they're getting into some fun stuff.
Okay, so Cody, will you share your screen and show us what the actual remote classroom looks like at LearningFuze?
Yeah, of course. Cool. So this is one of the major tools that our students will use. We recommend Visual Studio Code as our text editor for our students, our code editor. So you could see this is the actual repository that contains our work and a list of all of the lessons, which are organized into subfolders that have any documents you might need, as well as a README that has instructions. So you can always view the instructions directly in your code editor if you choose to. But we also have all of this hosted through GitHub. So this is the GitHub repository for that lesson. And when we go through our lessons, we will just send over the link to whichever exercise you'll be working on, which would then send you to this page that would give you your detailed instructions on what you should be doing. So that's really how we relay the course curriculum. And then the lessons are sent to our students in their Slack channel as we progress through the curriculum. So once one topic is done, I will then tell them what the next thing is that they're going to be working on and give them a direct link to it. I can show you our Slack, so I can give kind of a view of the sort of thing that you can expect to see. So this is my active junior cohort right now, and we can see that this is their main hub channel where we'll put in links to documents they might need, slideshows, videos, basically just most pertinent instruction for the course. And then we also have a few other channels that every cohort gets. This one, off topic, is our adaptation to remote learning, where this is just kind of everybody gets to be in the same room and they can chat and talk about what they're working through. This was actually from yesterday. Our career services director, TJ, was giving them a lecture and eating his salad for lunch. And he was apologizing for eating during lecture. So I said, you just got to turn it into a smoothie and then you could be done. And I thought it was a throwaway joke, but then he just went and made the actual smoothie and posted pictures of it. He's a hoot. But yeah, so this is where our students can go and just chat about the subjects or just whatever's going on so that they can still have an active non-coding related community interaction as well. And then we also have a channel dedicated for pull requests, which if you're not familiar, whomever might be listening, is just a way through GitHub that you can incorporate work, but we use it as a way to turn in our work. So once the students have completed it, they'll send a link to their pull request where we can go and give them feedback on it. And then last but not least, we have a channel for each cohort called the question queue, where our students will be able to come in and describe anything that they have a question on, things that they need to work on, target us instructors directly, and summarize their problem the best they can. And that way we have a clear queue so that everybody is getting help in the correct order. So yeah, that's usually how we do our communication. And then of course, class takes place in Zoom.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So class. So you have a student would kind of follow the curriculum, but they're actually meeting with the rest of their cohort and their instructor every day in the morning. Like, is that a kind of key part of?
Yeah. Our instructional hours are from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And with the exception of the lunch hour from 1:30 to 2:30, we have a Zoom call with all instructors active at all times. And all of our students are always in the room too. So even though it's remote, it still feels like we're all in a shared space and we can chat with each other if we need to. And I can pitch in if I have something I need to say. So it makes it still feel like a very shared classroom experience, which is really nice. Yeah.
That's cool. And so like, how would y'all have done that hackathon that you did a couple days ago? Would that have all been done in Slack and Zoom?
Yeah. Had we been in person, that's usually where, you know, all the students would get put into their group and then they like circle up their desks and have a dedicated little work area that they can collaborate in. And of course, we can't do that from remote learning. But what we did to deal with that is we still have it a group-oriented project. The only difference is that our students get breakout rooms within Zoom. So every group gets its own isolated working space, and then they can come back to main session if they have questions, but then everybody can work amongst their group without distractions. So it adapted pretty darn well. Everybody was able to flow pretty easily.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this seems very organized and collaborative as well, which is really cool to see. Is there any other part of the remote classroom that you want to share with your students?
I think those are the primary things we would use. You get your GitHub for actual course curriculum. Slack is for our written communication, and then Zoom is for verbal communication. And then we would use VS Code for actually writing your code. And then, of course, I mean, this is a very common tool, but we do a lot of work in the terminal for our Git work as well. So those are really the primary tools that any of our students will work with.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you for showing off that remote classroom.
Yeah, of course.
So then, since you've been teaching for a couple of years, I'm curious what you like, how you consider your teaching style, and also how that's changed. Like, do you feel like it's changed as you've moved to being a remote instructor?
That's a great question. And I actually, I'm excited to say I really haven't had to change it too much. As far as my teaching style, anybody you talk to who has heard me teach will tell you that my teaching style comes by way of enthusiasm and excitement for the concepts. And that does tend to mean that I'm a bit louder than anyone has any right to be, but it means that my students get to see that I really care about this subject. And the enthusiasm is genuine. I feel like I can show it off even from a distance, and my students get to have hopefully a little of that rub off onto them so that their passion can grow for the code. The one major difference that I feel like I've had to take in is that when I was in person, on work time, I would always be walking around the classroom and looking at my students' computers and seeing how they're doing. And unfortunately, I don't have that luxury anymore. So what we have to do to offset that is we just do direct check-ins with all of our students. Hey, how you doing? How's the curriculum going? You feel like you're getting everything? And then we'll just do check-ins throughout the day with everybody as well, just to make sure everybody's on a good path. So we just had to adapt to a point where we can't just walk up to the students now. We just have to communicate through Zoom or Slack. But as far as my actual teaching style, I've been able to teach the same way as I always have. So it's been pretty nice.
Well, your enthusiasm shines,
Thank
really
you.
shows. So, okay. So in the past, LearningFuze has a pretty great history of getting students jobs in the industry, and obviously, like, that is the entire purpose of our industry, of coding bootcamp. So how are y'all thinking about helping students remotely in the job search? What changes there?
Yeah, well, actually, not a whole bunch has changed in that route either, at least in the process. You know, of course, the job market is adapting to the situation. And so we're trying to find ways to change things up and get students like projects to work on and things like that. But our career services still begins in week 1 of the program. We start out with getting our students getting their resume in order, building out a properly formatted LinkedIn profile, started on networking and opportunities for networking and talking about remote meetups that are happening. We still do our mock interviews with students so they get that opportunity. It's just via Zoom. And then after graduation, historically, we've given our students the freedom to come into campus if they want to get some work done, but they can also work from home and just have remote check-ins with us. So we've just made that, you know, we're remote from the very beginning. But our career services director, TJ, does weekly check-ins with them to have just like a job search chat. And all of that is still progressing the same way that it did before. So yeah, it's actually been pretty easy to adapt.
Have y'all had a cohort of students start the like full job search yet remotely?
We have, yeah. We had a cohort graduate recently, and they are doing pretty good. Jobs are still happening. They're getting out there and hitting pavement and talking to people. And sure enough, you know, the system continues to work. If you get out there and network and talk to people, things happen.
Yeah, I think we're lucky that the industry that bootcamp graduates are, you know, going into has been at least hit less hard during all of this.
It's a pretty immortal industry. You know, tech is always going to be vital. And even now, like with the remote option for everybody, digitalization has become vital. So there's no lack of work for us. If anything, it's just a slight adjustment as companies figure out how to adapt hiring for remote learning. But, yeah.
What's the best advice that you've heard from a student or even an instructor about how to get a job after you graduate from a remote boot camp now? Any job hunting tips?
It might, it might sound kitschy, but honestly, the best tip that you can get is to stay active. There's the worst thing you could do for yourself is to throw out some resumes and wait to hear from them. You just want to keep hitting the ground running. You know, every day job search is a job. You got to wake up, you got to get out there, put out resumes, talk to people. You should be devoting multiple hours every day to getting out there and being part of networking or looking for job listings. The people who do that and are constantly staying up to date, and we check in with, and they're like, yeah, I applied to 10 positions today. I found some more situations to look at here. I'm going to be going to a networking event. Those are the people that within weeks get jobs. So it's just all about sticking with the hustle.
Okay, that's great advice. So you mentioned that as an online program, LearningFuse could now teach students who are outside of California. But
Right.
as you know, folks continue to experience unemployment, are you expecting to see an influx of demand from people who have lost their jobs in service industries? And I guess if so, you know, LearningFuse isn't something you can just like start tomorrow, right?
Right.
So how
Yeah.
can someone who is maybe like underemployed or unemployed right now take advantage of a program like LearningFuse? Where should they start?
Yeah. So the good news is, yeah, we totally expect people to be making a influx into the boot camps and like trying to get into technology. And the good news is we are definitely prepared for that. We are anticipating people coming to talk to us about making a switch in the wake of the situation. The one thing that we will say is that as we start to get those people coming in, our ultimate goal is to make sure that those people understand the journey they're about to get into. We don't want people to feel like this is going to be an easy transition. Obviously, you know, we try and make it as easy as we can with the curriculum, but learning code is hard. So pretty much always when we get somebody to come in, one of the first things we talk about is, are you ready to put in the time and energy it's going to take to succeed in this? And that's actually one of the things that we're most worried about, is that there may be other programs that don't have a screening process that could be taking advantage of that situation. But we are going to do our best to make sure that everybody who's coming in and looking for this as a possibility understands that it is going to be a huge journey, but that it can be done by anybody.
That's actually a great balance. Like you 100% have to like put a ton of effort and time into it. It's not just kind of a silver bullet, but also anyone can do it.
Absolutely. You know,
Good to know. Yeah.
It's so important to highlight the fact that this is a skill anybody can get, but not everybody can get it because some people aren't willing to put in that time and energy, you know. But if you've got the hustle, anybody can do it.
And there are like intro programs at LearningFuse, right? Do y'all have like a free intro class?
Yeah, we have Root Level 1, which is the course for just your introduction to HTML and CSS. And then we also have Root.js, which is your introduction to JavaScript. And the Root Level 1 course is mandatory for anybody moving into the full immersion, just so you can get a little bit of an exposure to HTML and CSS, and even more so just our style of teaching to see how things are going to work once you move into the program. And then Root.js is optional, but always very highly recommended, because getting a little bit of time with JavaScript before you dive into the full immersion program invariably makes the journey a little bit easier. And yeah, Root Level 1 is free to anybody who comes to attend an info session with us. So if you want to see how we teach, I definitely encourage you to attend an info session. We have multiple throughout the week. And if you do that, then you get to take the class entirely for free. And then Root.js does have a cost associated with it, but it is deducted if you actually go forward to the full immersion. So both of those are really good ways to see if this is just something that would be a good fit for you.
Cool. Love it. All right. Well, you've answered this question a bit already, but it's the number one question that I get right now. So I'll finish our Q&A with this one. Why is now a good time for someone to make a career change into tech?
Yeah. I did kind of touch on it a little bit, but I'll reiterate the fact that, like, in the wake of this situation, everybody is needing to figure out, okay, well, we need to continue. Like, business can't just stop. So we're going to have to find a way to make this slot into remote business and being able to do things digitally. So there's a huge influx of companies that maybe didn't have as much of a dedicated digital presence as they needed, and are starting to see, yeah, we need to start developing an actually good web presence and tools that we can work with our clients with. So as soon as these things start to get more steady in terms of the hiring process, we expect, I've been talking to our career services director, TJ, about it, and he thinks we're going to get a huge rise in employment going forward just because of all the companies that are going to need to put more attention into that digitalization. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Cool. Well, that is a perfect place to end. So thank you so much, Cody. This was wonderful. Appreciate all of your advice and for giving us that walkthrough.
It's been wonderful. Thank you again so much for having me and talking with me. I'm glad I got the chance to chat about what we do, and hopefully we get some people hearing about our mission and want to see what we're about.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Okay. And then thank you everyone for joining, and let us know in the comments which bootcamp you'd like to see a virtual classroom walkthrough with next. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you guys.